Would like to welcome everyone and thank you for taking time out to join us today for the ICC AOKPass Technology and Travel panel. Essentially, we will be speaking to a fantastic panel of experts on some of the challenges of how to restart and reopen travel, tourism, utilizing technology. So very honored to welcome our speakers today, panelist John W.H. Denton, AO, who's the International Chamber of Commerce Secretary General, Alexandre de Juniac, who is the International Air Transport Association Director General and CEO. He'll be joining us later in this broadcast. Professor Chester Drum, who's AOKPass co-founder, Manuel Butler, who is the UN World Tourism Organization Executive Director, as well as Natalia Bayona, who is the UNWTO's Director of Innovation and Digital Transformation, James Mcdonald, who's the Program Director from the World Travel and Tourism Council, Ivan Bassato, who's the Executive Vice President of Airport Management at ADR, which is Aeroporti di Roma, the airport in Rome, as well as the group, and Frank Merida, who's the TAV Airport Holding Deputy CEO. I'm the moderator today. My name is Dorji Sun, and I'm also an AOKPass co-founder. Just as background on AOKPass, it's very important to note that we were led by the International Chamber of Commerce. The International Chamber of Commerce is a 100-year-old not-for-profit. It's a multilateral institution which spans 45 million businesses and 1.2 billion employees. So as the arbiter of trade and travel, it has a very important place in the restarting of the economy. We have International SOS, which is the world's largest medical and travel services firm with 2/3 of the Fortune 500. So again, believing deeply in the network of medical expertise, and also SGS, which is the world's largest verification firm. And why we're here today is because with our partners on this exemplary panel, we've been able to put together what we believe is coming close to a tipping point for air travel to be able to be safely restarted with consistency and harmonized processes. And so we're very pleased to report that we now have nearly 175 airports in collaboration through various groups that we are working with and in close collaboration with. And the hope is, can we have a grassroots harmonizing of travel? We've also been in deep collaboration and discussions with many different organizations. We've been working extensively with, as you can see from this slide, with airport groups, travel authorities, multilateral organizations, airlines, vaccine makers, corporates, higher labor companies, as well as sovereign governments. And we'll be talking more about that today. Very much encourage anyone who's in the audience to please pose questions in the Q&A. And we're hoping for a free-flowing conversation. As moderator, I will be sharing questions that you will be providing. And so feel free again to add any contributions or questions into the Q&A. Now handing over to ICC Secretary General John Denton. Looking forward to some introductory comments and an overview of where we stand in this COVID pandemic with regards to technology and travel. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks so much, Dorji, and welcome to everyone. It's great to be here, and it's great to be on a panel with so many friends and allies in the battle to ensure that not only do we reopen travel and tourism, but we also kickstart building forward better the global economy, which is one of our aims. So why are we involved at the ICC? As Dorji says, we're 100 years old. We are an institution, a not-for-profit, a very much a for-purpose organization. When we talk about for-purpose, our job is to enable business worldwide to secure peace, prosperity, and opportunity for all. We span the globe. We, the institutional voice of 45 million businesses, employing 1.2 billion workers. Interestingly, just on this particular project, we also have the full support of the international trade union movement. Because of the nature of who we are, we're actually able to bring together all the most critical partners to actually enable things to get done. We're in the developing world. We look after large businesses and small businesses. So it's really important that you understand when you're listening here that we're here because it's actually completely in line with our purpose. And in the context of COVID-19, what we've seen is the destruction, effectively, of the value chain around travel and tourism. And we can't stand by. We actually have to do something about that. So what is it that we do? One of the most important things to understand about the ICC is not only do we involve ourselves in high-level policy, we also create standards, and we actually also create practical tools to enable those standards to be delivered in line with a policy framework which is supportive of our purpose, which is enabling business. We do this all over the place. In fact, this morning, I launched the first governing board meeting of our Digital Standards Initiative in Singapore, which is a global movement that we have coalesced with governments, regional development banks, business and individuals to create the global standards that will underpin the digital economy. We're doing that because governments are unable to cooperate effectively to do it themselves. And so the business community, recognizing the need, is doing that. We do the same thing in climate change, by the way, where governments can't act. We create things like the ICC Carbon Council. We then create trading mechanisms. So what we do is we help shape global policy, regional policy, support governments to make better policy. We then create standards, which are open standards, which everyone can contribute to. And because ultimately we're practical, we know we also have to create tools to enable that to happen. This is exactly what we're doing with this challenge around opening up global borders and to enable mobility, not just in travel and tourism, but frankly also in roads, also across the seas, and also in rail. When I think about what we've achieved in the last 4 months working with Dorji and the team, we're actually covering movements now in every region, in MENA, in sub-Saharan Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, in the Arab world. We've actually created momentum there. We've also created and involved various players there in setting better policies. One, to actually take a view that it's absolutely critical to get the economies moving to open up borders. So for example, in Central America, we're working very closely with all the Central American governments to actually open up road transport so that they can get goods across borders by using a standard that we've developed and then an app that we've actually developed, which is ICC AOKPass. Similarly, in travel and tourism, we know by the end of this year, there'll be something like 190 million jobs lost. We also know that more than 50% of those jobs will be held by women. We also know that more than a third of those jobs will be young people. What kind of what more exacerbation of global inequality do we need? For heaven's sake, we have to act on this if we want to preserve an effective global economy moving forward, which everyone feels is actually inclusive. So what we have done over a period of the last 4 or 5 months now is actually build out a policy position which is to enable travel and tourism to regain a footing. We have to shift the policy settings to allow for something that can give people the confidence to travel and give them actually the simplicity of how to do so. And in aviation, it has to be about pre-departure testing. It then has to be about ensuring by having 100% effectively pre-departure tested flights, people have the confidence to actually travel again. And if we can do that, then we can remove what is the greatest barrier to opening up travel and tourism, which is actually the quarantine system. You know, the idea that if I fly from Rome to Buenos Aires, I've got to effectively quarantine for 4 weeks, 2 weeks both sides. I mean, the likelihood of me doing that is limited. Obviously, we want to do that in a way which is health conscious and enables safety and security, which is why the whole testing regime is so absolutely critical. So we have spent our time at a global policy level engaging in debates because we have a permanent seat at the United Nations. We are the key interlocutor at the G20, through the private sector, through the B20, etc. In various agencies and organizations we work at, we've spent our time there arguing the case for shifting those policy settings, because without that, all the best efforts of the private sector will fall, because you will not have a mandatory obligation to have 100% flights which are actually COVID-free because everyone on board is being tested. We need to get to that point. That's what we're aiming for here. I'm delighted because one thing we also know is that international organizations of the quality of UNWTO, IATA, ICAO, etc., are only in a way as strong as their members. So one of our jobs is to help those members at governmental level see a better policy future and create, in a sense, the political credibility for them to actually shift and in many respects pick up what is our notion, which is really the idea that pre-departure testing is actually critical and actually enabling that to happen. We're also working extensively, therefore, with all the players. So with the airlines, with the airports critically, with the organizations that link them up. So at a macro level, I think we're doing our job, shifting those policy settings. And we have seen as a direct result of our interventions, shifts coming out of the European Union, shifts coming out of individual nation states, and movement even happening at a global level to recognize and endorse this. The piece that's missing then is the standard. And that, of course, is what we do best. Because the ability of the global world to function effectively with simplicity here is by developing a global standard, and that's what we're working on at the moment. And then on top of that, an application, a tool, if you like, which can be easily deployed and which is actually operationally effective, but more importantly, in the 21st century, is health effective. So therefore, you actually have the complete linkages with clinics for testing and for attestation as to someone's status, but is also importantly, and this is a unique feature, absolutely privacy protective of individual citizens. And it then fits onto an open standard, not a proprietary standard, because there's a real danger in the way in which some of these opportunities start moving along, that people seek to find opportunities to create money for themselves, monetize. Whereas what we need here to enable global business, to enable the world to operate, is an open standard. And that's what we're working on. And we don't, in the end, whichever app is whichever's app, but there so happens that we've developed one which is actually privacy protective and actually is able to ensure the health aspects as well and medically certified. And I think that's incredibly important for us and for the debate. So that's where we are. And we've got all those pieces in play now. One of the most delightful things about participating in this discussion today, we've got the key players involved. We're also in discussions with WHO. The ICC is the only private sector organization that has that direct linkage now, because we work very closely with WHO, not just on COVID-19, but also now I am, on behalf of the global private sector, the only private sector individual who participates in the COVAX discussions. So we're actually working with the WHO to ensure that whatever we develop is actually as strong and robust as possible. We understand all these things, and with sovereign states. We are getting close, I think, as Doji says, to a tipping point, and that's incredibly important for us. But to move us to that tipping point, I want to announce today 3 key things, which I think are critical. First of all, in order to get this standard right, what we know from our experience is that we actually have to lead in terms of discussions and creating the framework for the development of an effective standard. So we announced today that we are creating and developing a white paper, which will articulate clearly what the standard should be to create an effective, privacy protecting, health ensuring standard to use on a global basis that will cover off clinics, testing, attestation, representation, whether through physical or digital, etc., and actually how all that pulls together. And we will do that. And within the next month, we'll create that white paper, which will actually set the framework for the next debate around what the standard. So we're shifting the policy settings, let's get the standard. And in doing so, we'll be crowding in on a collaborative basis organizations like UNWTO to work with us. The WHO will be invited to participate. ICAO, which we also have an observer position. IATA, we're already working with them in a working group. WTTC, all the players, the airports group, ACI as well. And we'll also open it up, as we do with everything else we do, with private sector and with governments, and they participate. We're doing that right now in sub-Saharan Africa in what's called trade facilitation, where we crowd in the private sector, governments, development agencies to ensure you get a better result. We are well used to doing that, but it starts with white papers and discussions. The next thing it starts with is high-level action to ensure that there's momentum and motivation. So we also announced today the creation of a high-level action group within ICC, which will bring together our G20 leaders within the ICC, all the key national committees and chambers that are involved in that movement, and actually bring them together with an action group to support further action and support further acceptance of a policy framework which requires pre-departure testing. So we will do that for a second. The third thing, which is really important, as Storji said, we are a very big organization. We intend to mobilize our whole footprint, and we're going to do that. We are launching today a social media campaign, which we backed up with an additional national committee and a World Chambers Federation campaign, which is quite simple, a ticket, a test. Hashtag a ticket, a test. And we will then build a movement around that on a global basis to ensure that at the grassroots level, we're talking about the SMEs, micro SMEs, and all those who work with them, that we bring that force together. So 3 things: creating a standard requires creating a white paper, creating what that standard, actually describing what that standard should look like, ensuring that there's complete visibility and there's a line with key global decision makers. So we do that through our action group, and actually mobilizing from the bottom. We work in the developed and developing world. We are already operational with ICC AOKPass. We started by doing the hard yards and now have an operational set of pilots running from the UAE into Pakistan. We will then start moving into other developing countries, and delightfully, I'm so glad to have Aeroporti Roma and TAV, because simultaneously we're working on critical, high-powered and high-value routes as well to get global tourism moving. Thank you very much for allowing us to actually bring you all together today. A ticket, a test, we'll get there. Let's get global tourism moving again. Let's get global travel moving again. And let's get those planes back in the air full of passengers, all feeling completely confident because they are on a COVID-19 free flight. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And I think that's a fantastic segue to Manuel Butler, the Executive Director from UNWTO, if you would be so kind to share some comments with us.
Thank you very much to inviting us, UNWTO. Thank you very much, dear John, to inviting us to this meeting. AOKPass, sector stakeholders, all participants. Thank you very much for being here and hearing us. From the UNWTO perspective.
Oh no.
Manuel, sorry, you've hit
the... Sorry. From the UNWTO perspective, we are very aligned with has said and tell us John Denton of ICC, in order that we have to go forward to these global standards in order to give a global response to a global challenge, to a global problem like this from the COVID-19. And that is not the solely event. It will be coming another event in a deeper globalized world that we are living in. Of course, this campaign, a ticket, a test, I think is great. That's fantastic. We are considering, of course, a lot of possibilities that we have called our SG through a politically called a global tourist crisis committee in March, and we are working very deeply on the solutions and sharing the best practices between all the actors, all the players worldwide, in order to accelerate the recovery of the tourist sector. We are considering, we are analyzing what will happen in the coming years for the recovery of the sector, and we think that between 2.5 years and 4 years we will reach again the pre-COVID levels of 2019. That means that we are living with a low demand, at least for a couple of years. And it depends, there will be 2.5 years, on 4 years, on or less. It depends on the coordination, the harmonization, and giving this global response. This global response is not the adequate until today. We have done a lot of efforts, but that's something that we have to have considered as the biggest challenge that we have, besides of the health challenge, of course. We are working together with all the UN organizations, with the private sector, with the ICC, of course, with IATA, ACI, WTTC, all the biggest private sector association and the public multilateral organization our sister UN organizations, and of course the member states, they are building the UNWTO. We have the convergence between technology and innovation that's paramount in order to successfully sort out from this crisis, of course. That we have lost that in this year a lot of international arrivals. At least half of the arrivals that we are get last year, we are losing this year. And in terms of sport revenues, we're losing over 500 billions US dollar. There are tremendous figures, a tremendous impact of this crisis, and we have to act as our SG, UNSG, Guterres said that should be this decade, the decade of action. And that's why we are welcome this initiative for the International Chamber of Commerce and the AOKPass in order to solve and to go forward to find solutions for the crisis that we are now middle in. From our perspective, jointly with the Secretariat of the UNWTO, on other players, they have joined us in this global tourist crisis committee. We have launched the Hidden Solutions Challenge jointly with the WHO in March this year, with a fantastic response, over 1,000 applicants and 30 finalists from 100 countries. Or for example, the UNWTO Safe Travel Solutions Catalog, that's a safe encrypted storage for medical records, global COVID-19, immunity certificates, hand-hygiene solutions, secure check-in terminals in public places, border areas, among others. We have to work further on it. For the recovery, we have, as I have said you, this global crisis committee that we have issued jointly with the members of this global crisis committee in a high level position. For example, the number one of all these organizations, IATA, CLIA, the cruise industry as well is represented there, and of course the OECD and so on and so forth. We have produced a UNWTO recommendations in a very early stage in order to have some guidance in this unprecedented crisis that is facing the tourism sector. We are producing now a UNWTO Tourism Recovery Tracker in order almost in real time, knowing how it's happening, how it's developing the tourism worldwide. I think that's key. Of course, the two main pillars for the recovery for the new tourism, not only the new normality, the new tourism that we're now coming in a new completely tourism business model. One is sustainability, the other one, of course, is the digitalization. And the One Planet Vision, there are 5 UN agencies involved in that, UNWTO among them. We have given a responsible recovery of tourism sector with concrete actions in order to go in the right way. Of course, the Tourism Online Academy is building on the job retention, job talent, the upskill position of the jobs, and of course as well the jobs factory in order to attract talent from other sectors. Then tourism is getting more and more complex in this new phase, in the new tourism that we are coming in. We have launched a lot of challenges and competitions, but I would like to highlight only 2. The Sustainable Development Goals Global Startup Competition that we have launched during this month, with 130 countries taking part, and more than 5,000 participants in it. Or for example, the Tourist Tech Adventure that with almost 6,000 applications coming from 150 countries. We are welcome all this initiative of AOKPass pass, then I think they are in the right direction, the right way, in order to put everyone in the right direction, align efforts, and to accelerate the recovery, to mitigate the impact of the COVID. And that we have to bear in mind that at the end, we have to protect the lives, the livelihoods of the many entrepreneurs in the tourist sector. We have to bear in mind as well that the SME, small and medium enterprises, they are the majority of the tissue of the entrepreneur of the company's tissue in the tourist sector, and that we have to go in mind that start discussions with our network, with members, with the private sector, as is the case with the ICC, is a very fruitful and a very needless situation that we have to consider. Thank you very much. I think, I am sure of it, that this discussion will be bring fruitful discussions, and that we're moving forward and we're moving in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel. And I think that being a representative of the World Tourism Organization, the tourism industry being on the front line, the next three speakers actually, Chester, Frank, and Ivan, will be really sharing stories from the front line. So obviously, airports have been heavily impacted, and a lot of the work that's being done by AOKPass, by the ICC, by the network is really bringing those airports back online. And so I think a very powerful case study of this grassroots mobilization is what's happening in Rome. So Ivan, what I'll do is I'm going to hand over to you and share your slides, especially the photos, which are incredibly powerful to show the work that your team is doing on the ground to re-establish trust. So
just a couple of seconds before going to the pictures and the short introduction, Dorji.
Absolutely, please.
Of course, thank you very much to ICC and to AOKPass for the invitation to participate in such important webinar. We share all your efforts, and we are fully supportive to projects that try to promote the revitalization of air travel across borders on a global basis. I need to go back maybe to the summer peak period, August in Italy, very important country for tourism worldwide. In August, in Rome airports, we experienced a decrease of traffic of minus 80%. So out of 5 passengers that we had in 2019, in August, we are just left with 1. How was that? Of course, the impact of the pandemic, but also the fact that after the lockdown period, after the first phase of the pandemic, the first wave, which hit Italy in March and April timeframe, the recovery was very mild. The so-called phase 2 and phase 3 actually were taking us to a very partial return to the level, pre-pandemic level, in such important airport for Italy and for Europe. We ran through an analysis. We tried to understand why all our efforts to build a safe airport, to communicate that air travel was safe, successful in principle, were not taking passengers back to the system. As I said, first 6 months of this year, first part of the pandemic, a lot of work to improve processes, design new processes, apply at the airport, implement the recommendations of the authority, the new regulations, and we were pretty successful in that by using a lot of technology, a lot of sanitization in the airport, thermal scanning, new equipment. We were able to communicate that air travel was safe even in pandemic times. We got 5-star by Skytrax very recently as the world's safest airports in terms of health protection. Nevertheless, many passengers were not coming back. Clearly, there was an impact of the very severe restrictions, very severe limitations that we have enforced in our country and in general in Europe. If you come from outside the European Union, you are still subject to quarantines. You are still subject to very strong limitations about the reasons for traveling. There is a clear lack of confidence. So in August, we said, we are going to face a very harsh fall and winter time if we are not able to promote, to create new models. And we came up very easily with the concept in cooperation with Alitalia, and looking also at the initial concepts communicated by the ICC, by AOKPass, we came up very easily with the idea that we need to test passengers before departure. We were in a favorable position. Beginning of August, the Ministry of Health of Italy mandated arrival screening on passengers that were coming from certain countries that at that moment were considered a higher risk. So the first step was the fact that by mid-August, we started an operations to screen, to test passengers at the airport that were coming from 4 European countries that are very popular with Italians for holidays: Spain, Greece, Croatia, and Malta. That was the beginning, August 16th. A lot of things happened since then. Then the list of countries that are now considered in Europe obviously changed. We have other countries that are in the list of those origins where passengers need to be tested upon arrival. But we have, and this is what we built in the final part of the summer, a considerable testing capacity in operations at the airport. So if you can share now the pictures, Dorji. So this is a project that we started, and we are still operating in full cooperation with the full endorsement of the regional health authority and the Italian Minister of Health. Actually, it is a joint operation. We are providing the areas in the airport and outside the airport, and the healthcare professionals are actually belonging to the public bodies of Italy and the region of Rome. What are we doing over here? This is the screening that takes place at the terminal. It's antigen testing. I think that Italy and the regional authorities were among the first ones in the world to put antigen testing as an alternative in the legislation for health screening in the context of the COVID pandemic. They are both recognized as official testing methods for screening large volumes of passengers, large flows of passengers. This area in the terminal is about as a size of 1,000 square meters. There are 26 medical boxes, and it does have a capacity of screening 2,400 passengers per day. Then there is another area outside the terminal. It's a drive-through facility. If you can go to the next slide, Doji, thank you. In this area is almost an hectare of surface. There is the possibility to accommodate more than 100 autos, and it's a concept. It's designed as with the operational concept of the drive-through testing lanes. There are a maximum of 6 testing lanes, a capacity of almost 3,000 tests per day. Final slide, please, Doji. Thank you very much. Since August 16th in Rome airport, mainly Fiumicino, but also in the other airport of Rome Ciampino, the health authorities screened over 40,000 passengers with antigen testing. It was not only arriving passengers, because with the cooperations of Alitalia and the region of Rome, we started to test passengers. We made the trial, still ongoing. The first day was September 16th, on passengers departing from Rome to Milan. There was no real health monitoring needs to screen passenger between Rome and Milan. Right now in the countries we have similar risk levels, but we want to prove with the domestic flight that pre-departure testing was feasible. And we did it successfully, because after 35 days into the trial, we can say that the passengers appreciated, their feedback is very positive, appreciated the fact that they are offered with the possibility to get on board on flights that are fully tested. This is a concept that we consider extremely viable to revitalize air travel and tourism between different regions of the world. The minus 80% of Rome airport in August, now it's minus 83% because the trend is negative, traffic figures are going down, is made of minus 60 on the domestic part of the traffic numbers, but it is made of minus 96% on long-haul international flight. The regions of the world are totally disconnected. We are missing 3 million visitors from the United States that we had in 2019, 600,000 Canadians. That traffic is completely deleted, and Europe is really isolated in this moment. Italy, Rome are isolated. So what do we need? We need an alternative system, equally safe, maybe safer, to the quarantine regime, to a regime that limit the reasons for traveling. We need to go back to a situation where people can safely travel also for reasons that are not strictly connected to health factors, to urgency, or to professional reasons. So we think we have a way, we have a model in cooperation with the AOKPass and with all those providers of smart technologies that are very, I would say, handy when it comes to authenticate the medical certificates and make them available quickly in an airport environment. We need these alternative solutions, and we are ready to implement those at the airport. The experience of Rome, in my opinion, allows to demonstrate that we can combine health safety. Among those 40,000 people that were screened at Rome Airport, there were many asymptomatic positives that were blocked and they were forbidden from mixing into the communities and crossing borders. We can combine health safety with a revitalization of air travel. We cannot afford absolutely to stay in such conditions. We need to move forward.
Thank you, Ivan. And I think that, looking at the price economics of antigen tests, Roche, Abbott Labs, they've talked about sub $10 tests compared to the economic costs of PCR, $150 plus. I think that there's a very fascinating conversation about both economics and science. Understanding as well, Natalia, do understand that, there is some time constraints. I might go to Chester, but also actually, Natalia, if you wanted to share some of your thoughts as the UNWTO Director of Technology and Innovation, we would really love to hear some perspectives on the technologies and the price curves that you're starting to see as this pandemic continues. Where are the game changers going to come? And then after that, we'll go back to Chester with regards to some of the medical overview and pilot overviews, and then to Frank.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Dorji. It's my pleasure to be here today, and of course, to be with John and to support the tourism recovery. As Manuel said, our position inside the UNWTO basically is that, of course, technology and innovation has to be a strong priority, but it doesn't depend on the pandemic or not. What we think is that, of course, due COVID-19 have accelerated the use of technologies and, of course, the challenges that we had in the past. How do we see this? Of course, working with the startups, working with entrepreneurs is a top priority of this house before COVID-19 as well. So that's why we always talk about fostering and empowering the tourism innovation ecosystem in order to give opportunities to corporates, to talk to startups and to investors, and of course, to strengthen opportunities through technology. So our vision is that, of course, technology is the key driver today to recover tourism, because of course, through technology, we can be more efficient. As Manuel said, what we have seen inside the UNWTO is that, of course, when we launch any single project that we do, we have a lot of youth and a lot of talented minds from all around the world that are bringing solutions. And when I'm talking about solutions, it's not only ideas. They are early stagers, Series A or Series B, very mature entrepreneurs that are working today with governments to add value to the tourism recovery. So of course, I can give you a lot of examples. I remembered since the beginning when John came to UNWTO that we got in love with AOKPass because of course it's a very efficient way to empower and to travel safely again. We are working with Common Pass, that is one of the applications that have been endorsed by the World Economic Forum. We work, of course, with a lot of applications that are in our roster of applications from the startup competitions. So for example, I give you a practical example. There's a Spanish talented scale-up that used to sell and used to promote the digital agenda for destinations. As of today, because of course, no agenda, no tourism, and we were closed, that technology decided to rebuild their business model. And now they decided to create, through machine learning, a dashboard that can help us in real time to see what are the protocols and what are the things that a tourist need to come from one country to another. So they rebuilt themselves, and now they are working with the top airlines in the world in order, of course, to have aligned and formal information from formal sources in order to help to organize and to coordinate tourism again. So if you tell me today, our challenge, of course, and John and Manuel already talk a bit on this, is of course to coordinate the efforts of the international organizations and that the governments can act and can work with those innovators that today, as AOK, they have a lot of work that have been done in some regions, but of course we have to help you to spread and to scale through another countries in order, of course, to be coordinated. On the other hand, when borders, because borders, of course, have been closed, 100 million jobs are under risk. So today, once again, technology is going to help us. So that's why we have been developing strong efforts to update our UNWTO Tourism Online Academy, that is a specialized platform where every single person in the world that wants to gain skills in the tourism sector can come there and can gain management skills on tourism. Of course, we are working this with the MIT, with IE University, Harvard, Cornell, etc. But our challenge today is to help vocational training as well, because of course there's a strong path. And as John said, 50%, we are the top employers of the world. Nonetheless, 50% of the youth that works in tourism only have secondary skills. So if we are working on developing added value jobs, on preserving jobs, of course, we need to train well people. And of course, digital education has to be the way in order to scale up this. And that's why we have, during the past days, our Secretary General launched like the phase B, or the second phase of the Tourism Online Academy, that is the Jobs Factory. Because of course, if I want to study better and to gain more skills, my expectations is of course to have a better job. So we are working here once again with a scale up from Silicon Valley, Eightfold, that is developing a platform that will join the Tourism Online Academy with another platform that will be the Jobs Factory. So once you study with us for free or paid, because of course you have both opportunities, then you can jump and you can have a fast track to have an evaluation on your skills, and of course to access to new opportunities where affected employees can go there, where corporates can post, of course, different type of vacancies, etc. So there we close the cycle between giving opportunities to everyone through digital education, and then to give opportunities to either preserve or to jump to a better job. So everything I have said during these 5 minutes is about how technology is a key driver. So we are absolutely convinced that these days using and investing on new technologies is the way, because if we want to be efficient, of course, the solutions are there, but our challenge today is to make them alive, to make them to scale, and of course, to have there our top partners that are the governments on board using those applications and those working with those entrepreneurs in order to coordinate with travel and to coordinate the way we are rebuilding tourism for good. So just to end, another thing, so I have talked, of course, about innovation, about education, but my other branch is investments. So I just end a webinar with the Financial Times because we were today discussing and launching our joint foreign direct investment report. And lucky us, I have to say that in 2019, the tourism sector have received more than $61.8 billion on foreign direct investment, and we have helped to create more than 130,000 jobs, and that's a spectacular. And thank that the investment pipeline, of course, we don't invest from one day to another, or investors doesn't invest from one day to another. Investments through COVID-19 haven't failed. So, of course, the projects that had a strategic due diligence and that were approved in order to develop a hotel or an amusement park or some infrastructure thing, they have been continued. The challenge of foreign direct investment today is about the future, about how we convince the investors to come to the tourism sector and not to go to other sectors that, of course, have been challenged as well. So there is a golden opportunity where all the technological startups, the technological projects, in order to recover or to create better cities, more sustainable cities, more to invest in rural development, to develop new towns as a way to diversify tourism, is a key opportunity where we can help and we can improve, of course, the flows of tourism investment through this kind of projects. So
thank you, Natalia. That's fantastic. No, we really can see how the technology is dovetailing to the stories on the ground, where when you look at the airports and the slides shown by Ivan, that's happening in Rome. And we'd love to just now patch over to some of the other technological and scientific developments, as well as some of the pilots. So Professor Chester Drum is a medical practitioner, a physician, medical researcher at the National University Hospital of Singapore. Maybe give us some insight, and then after that, we'll jump to Frank with regards to some of the great work that ADP and TAV Group is doing from the airport side. And also just would love to welcome Alexandre de Juniac, the Director General and CEO of IATA, who will be speaking shortly after that. So over to you, Chester. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Georgie. So I think Natalia hit it on the head when she really emphasized it's the people at the end of the day that we're serving here by restarting tourism, by restarting travel, also as John emphasized. That is the constituency that we're serving, and it's a massive constituency and key part of the global economy. That's the reason it's important to consider all types of individuals when we are deploying these technologies. So as someone who is architecting both digital solutions and their implementation in faraway corners of the world, I'll just give you maybe 2 minutes of what it's like to go from nothing to an operational pilot using unselected customers, to their boarding a plane, all using authentication and tamper-proof certificates. You'll find that although for all the magic of smartphones, up to 30 to 40% of the people in these original repatriation flights, which are different than the more typical business flyers, do not have access to either the kind of smartphone that can work or any smartphone at all. So you have to accommodate every passenger with the technology for the technology to be relevant. The brilliant thing about internet technology, IT, is that you can bring the best and most secure solutions at extreme low cost or even zero cost to almost everybody. And that's something that we've emphasized in the routes in which we've implemented the AOKPass blockchain securitization network, and both, of course, the mobile app and our solutions for non-smartphone using customers. So I think actually most of the people on this call are indeed either early adopters of our blockchain solution, or certainly actively involved in its creation. So I don't think I need to go into too many details, but I'll just close with four bullet points that guide our principles for global rollouts. The first is you have to have absolute security in the authentication of the solution. Not just because lots of people try to cheat, but because you need that trust. You need that global trust if it's ever going to work. Two, the medical information needs to be at the individual level. We shouldn't take all the medical information and put it together. It should be decentralized to the individuals. They control it. It is never taken from them for the purpose. Number three, people with smartphones and without smartphones both need access to the solution. Otherwise, it is inequitable. And fourth, laboratories who provide these results should not have too many burdens to risk the integrity of their medical information. So we insist that it not be required that laboratories have public-facing web servers. So I'll close on that, and I'm happy to come back to any level of detail of how to get pilots started, how to get them implemented with labs all the way to the check-in desk. And I'll tell you what, when you're dealing with any customer who books a ticket, not airline staff, not business, but if you're dealing with the aggregate population, some very interesting things happen that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate. So it's been a fun journey.
Thanks, Chester. And I think this leads directly into IATA and Alexandre de Juniac's comments, because at the very front line of this, hand in glove with airports, really is the airline. So Alexandre, it's great to see you again. We've had communication this whole year. Who would have thought, end of October we would be in this situation? But would love to hear from you in terms of where you see this going, the policies you're driving forward, and some of the developments on the ground. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. But you know that the situation of the aviation and the airline business is how could I say, almost catastrophic. And we are facing a 90% decline in international or intercontinental travel. After the slow recovery we have faced in August, we have seen a ceiling and a decline of the traffic, particularly in Europe. And we do not see very positive sign, except the fact that when the travel restrictions are removed, it is clear that the appetite to fly is still there. We see that in China, even in the US, in which the domestic market, as particularly in China, has recovered at a level which is around 90% of the 2019 level. So what we have identified as the key blocking point to restart the air traffic are the travel restrictions, and particularly the quarantine measures. When there is a quarantine restriction, we have estimated with some simulation calculation about what happened in the first phase of the pandemic. When there is a quarantine restriction or even a quarantine risk, the level of bookings for that destination is reduced by 100%. So it is zero. So the quarantine is the perfect blocking point for air travel. So what we have worked a lot to see how we could convince government, to remove this travel restriction, to remove this quarantine, and as a counterpart, to adopt a safe process to ensure that they do not re-import the virus through air travel. And not surprisingly, the best system we have on the top of our mind, that we are negotiating either bilaterally with a lot of states, that we are experimenting in many airports. Charles de Gaulle is one of them, but we have also experiments in Rome. We have experiments in between Hawaii and the US. We have experiments in Toronto. We have experiments in Asia. We have experiments in Middle East. We are recommending a testing process at departure airport, using all possible tests, but because now the technology is at the right level, the sensitivity of the test is at the right level, the cost of the test is affordable, the technical management or the operational management of the testing process is accessible to trained people, but not super specialists, and not requesting very developed or high-level machines. We are pushing rapid tests based on the antigen technology that has significantly improved. So that's what we are pushing. Frankly, it's still a long way to go. We have to convince government to adopt that, because we are pushing this system to be implemented in every country universally, homogeneously. But there is a strong work to convince governments, health authorities, medical authorities that the system is safe and allows states to avoid re-importing the virus, because that's one of the key issues. We see some states who are refusing to remove any quarantine measures because they have successfully fought against the virus. We have that in China or in New Zealand, and they don't want to remove these travel restrictions at all, at least for the moment. And but there are a lot of states that are ready. My own country, France, to implement a rapid testing system at the departure airport to ensure that we fly COVID-free. That's the point. And the second point is also to say that with the level of sensitivity of the test, and if it is properly managed, the risk of transporting an infected person is so low that for the receiving country, the level of risk of re-importing the virus is below a very low threshold that allows the country to keep the pandemic under control. So that is the point. So to minimize the level of risk below a level which is reasonable in terms of controlling, the pandemic. So that's the point. In this process, there will be, of course, a certification process. How do we certify that the test has been done, that it is negative? And this certification will have to be provided by the departure authorities, airport, medical authorities, and probably transferred to the arrival state, because it is where the sensitivity is. So it's where probably we will need a certification process and an information transfer system that is first absolutely sure, secure, and recognized at the international level to allow the system to be implemented on a very broad base. So that's where we are, what we are working. We are also working multilaterally within ICAO and we hope that ICAO will adopt some recommendation that could be based on that systematic testing of all passengers at departure, before departure or at departure airport, and that this recommendation will be issued and implemented on a worldwide basis. But it will take time. It will take time, some weeks.
And thank you. And just building on what you said, which sovereign? So the ICC being based in Paris, working with ADP as well as with Rome Airport, legislation moving. Which sovereigns do you think are going to be the first cabs off the rank to lead the way? Because it's such a political hot potato right now. It literally is depending on when elections happen, when they have a mandate. Where do you see kind of the first movers in the sovereign space?
No, I'm not sure that it is totally related to elections. It is related to the confidence of health authorities that are holding the wheel currently, or influencing heavily government. So it will be based on the conviction of the health authorities that the process is safe or safe enough to maintain the pandemic under strict control. Secondly, it will also depend on the appetite of some government to reopen their borders because of their geographic position, the state of their economies, on how could I say, the push of the business community, but also of the tourism community. We will see some states that will push. France is one of them. Singapore probably will do we think that the US could be also among those who will push, which would be of course very important. But we have also a lot of states that are hesitating, that are, as many governments these days, that are a bit in the middle of nowhere, and so they are waiting to be convinced. So what we are working on is, with WHO, we try to gather all the data related to the experiments that are in place now, and we have mentioned several of them, to consolidate our case, to explain that both from the medical standpoint, but also from the operational standpoint, we have something that is working properly, and that is particularly safe, or reducing the risk to a level that is more than acceptable, that is ultra reasonable.
So, I mean, Alexandre, earlier, before, just at the beginning, introductory comments, John Denton from the ICC was talking about bringing together the industry around a white paper. What you just said around data is critical. I mean, it was the work between the Reunion Island and Paris from ADP Group that gave a lot of the confidence around pre-departure testing. Is there a white paper or a international standard, international aviation, around International Chamber of Commerce, International SOS? Or John, did you have any comments with regards to some of the things that Alexandre was saying around first movers, and how do we break this gridlock Q4, Q1?
Look, thanks very much, Georgie. And just to be really clear, Alexandre, we fully endorse, as you know, the policy position you're taking on a global basis. And what we're trying to do is simultaneously using all our efforts and our heft and our engagement at global policy level is to actually make that policy position of pre-departure testing, which is verifiable, which actually ensures the safety and health of individuals and reduces the risk of infection, absolutely the rule. What we also believe is necessary is one standard, because of the nature of what we are. That is what we're working on at the moment. And by the way, before you entered, I also launched a social, which will be a huge social media campaign we'll run globally, which is a ticket, a test, which we think will be a critical issue. We'll be running that from a grassroots level with business globally. But on the standard, we are actually now working with, I announced also today that we'll be pulling together a white paper. So what we do, we actually create other standards as well, a white paper which will ensure that all the elements are encapsulated there to create an effective privacy protecting standard, covering exactly the points you're saying. And what we always do is bring in intergovernmental organizations, governments, WHO, etc., into that. So it sounds like there's the working groups. The opportunity to cross over is very enormous, and we'll be bringing together, the third thing is a high-level action group of leading CEOs globally who are not necessarily tourism players, but these are key industry players who actually also believe in this as well. So hopefully that will be helpful to your efforts as well as pulling together the app, which is AOKPass.
And Director General Juniac, I know that we only have you for limited time. Were there any closing remarks that you had with regards to 2021? I think that there is definitely a movement in terms of countries and realizing the economic impact. Any final thoughts or comments with regards to the standardization and the work your organization is leading?
What we think is that 2021 is that the situation in 2021 or potential or partial recovery heavily depends on the attitude of states to reopen or not to reopen borders. If states are still in a kind of panic mode, closing borders or implementing quarantine, the traffic will not restart. Which is, I think, a drama not only from a tourism point of view, but it's a drama for the whole economy. So the dynamism of economy is there somewhere. So we have to successfully, convince governments to reopen their borders, to remove the quarantine, to implement an efficient and effective process that will guarantee that this reopening is not an additional threat to the health of the population. Not to mention vaccine, which is something else, and I'm totally unable to comment on that. I'm not a medical specialist. So that's the point. That's the point, and we should work on that, heavily to ensure that governments will reopen borders. That's the key issue. Effectively reopen borders, removing travel restrictions. So we have to work on a safe process. And we haven't found anything else more efficient, more effective, perhaps we're not very clever, I don't know, than systematic testing.
Thank you very much, Director General de Juniac. And just from the AOKPass, what we've learned is inclusiveness as well. So we've been working on offline and online validation processes that have the highest levels of privacy protection as well as the highest levels of confidence. Because just the time consumed checking thousands of different paper documents, I think that to bring back trust and confidence is also to bring back efficiency. But the final speaker for tonight, and we've got 10 minutes for Q&A, but we still have one final speaker from the WTTC. James Mcdonald, thank you so much for standing in and joining us. We do realize that you had conflicts, but we would love to just get some final comments from you, and then we'll go to John to do the thank yous. But looking at this tipping point, so the purpose of tonight was really to bring together many of the collaborators. So WTTC has signed with ICC the collaboration and the MOU. ICC AOKPass is working with TAV ADP Group with airports in around the world, as well as with Rome Airport, and of course IATA is leading the charge on the ground with the airlines. What are you seeing in terms of the pilots and the processes? How do you see us using technology to move the needle forward? How do we do this soon? Because it seems clear that as soon as you've got a $5 to $10 antigen test that's being able to be produced at several hundred million a month, I mean, rapid testing, systematic testing, pre-departure testing, I mean, it all seems very clear, as well as obviously a digital pass to avoid fraud, clear processes. What is the WTTC advocating for and seeing for urgent action? And you're just on mute right now. Sorry, James.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. So thank you for that, Georgie. So firstly, just apologies on behalf of WTTC. My CEO, Gloria Guevara, was due to speak today. Unfortunately, she's got called to an urgent government call. So I've replaced her today on behalf of the organisation. Picking up on Georgie's question, fundamentally, it's about international coordination. So at the moment, as we've heard some of the speakers say, there are lots of really good initiatives and projects going on around the world, tests and pilots. But what we can't see at the moment is anybody pulling that together into a coherent understanding. What are our lessons learned? What are the best practices? How do we roll this out and scale it up globally and quickly? and that really requires international coordination. Now, that's not just across well, a lot of these are aviation based. It's not just across the aviation space. So cruise lines, for example, are already now starting in the European area and are testing their passengers prior to embarkation and their crew. Hotels have started to introduce testing as well. And of course, as a passenger or as a traveler, you'd like a smooth, seamless experience all the way through your journey from your destination to your arrival and back again. So one of the ways WTTC is looking to address that is through in collaboration with the G20 group of states who are the world's 20 largest economies. So as probably most of you are aware, next month, the G20 World Leaders Summit will take place. But ahead of that, on the 7th of October, the G20 tourism ministers got together to address the future of tourism and how we can take it forward together in one collaborative way. And as part of that, for the very first time, the meeting was joined by 45 CEOs from travel and tourism companies from across the entire value chain, along with other distinguished guests and speakers, such as Alexandre from IATA and Secretary General Louis from ICAO. And all of them spoke with one voice, really, about the importance of the sector and some key priorities that we needed to address. And that meeting, or the G20 this year, is currently chaired by Saudi Arabia. And under the request of the Saudi Arabian chair, they requested WTTC prepare and submit a recovery plan for the sector. So WTTC for a number of years has conducted economic analysis across the sector, and most recently with the COVID crisis has been looking at the impact to jobs and the economies in the tourism and travel sector, which are currently, we're looking at around 100 million jobs at risk in a best case scenario and 197 million jobs at risk in a worst case scenario. So under the request of the Saudi Arabian government, we submitted a 100 million jobs recovery plan, which is available on the WTTC website. And that included 24 points, 12 points of action for the private sector, such as ourselves, and 12 recommendations for governments and the public sector. Now, those 24 points covered a wide spectrum of areas, but two in particular were on the importance of travel corridors and air bridges between key trading city pairs. So, for example, London and New York. And secondly, on the importance of departure testing and getting some commonality, some standards and some systems around the world. So as part of that, across all those 24 points, but those two in particular, we're going to set up some working groups, governance structures to address the recovery plan and try to pull together some international coordination around, in particular, testing, tracing and travel corridors. So those will commence in the coming days, and really is to capture all the lessons learned that we can from others around the world and to build on an approach going forward with a sense of urgency to make it happen. So that's a short summary of what we're doing and how we're looking to address it and take it forward.
Thank you, James. And with these types of, we're out of time, unfortunately. It's 90 minutes already gone. We have had questions regarding travel insurance, multi-stage travels, travel bubbles. So our team has endeavored to answer some of them in text. But I think what we should do, just given that we are out of time, first of all, thank you, James. Thank you for all the panelists. I'll do a just to finally share the thank you and the key takeaways from our perspective. First of all, we do believe that with all of the parties represented today, there is a tipping point. And not only is there a tipping point, there are the technologies coming on stream. It's just now a question of FDA approvals for antigen tests, a number of technical things and scientific things. But the technology, as advocated by Director General de Juniac, by Secretary General John Denton, by everyone on this panel, airports, airlines, everyone is bringing it together. There is a tipping point to create this trusted spoke-to-spoke Then it's just about sovereigns. You've got the G20. So the fact that Italy will be chairing the G20 next year is a very powerful proponent, given it's the #1 tourist country in the world by numbers, 80 million tourists, and obviously has huge focus on arts, cultures, and tourism. And just lastly, a tremendous thank you from the audience, from the organizers, from all of the participants, to the speakers today, and to all of the organizations that collaborated. There will be a recording of this panel available later, as well as materials from the presentation. And we just wanted to thank everyone. Hashtag, a ticket, a test, primarily, focusing on the fact that we don't necessarily, if we bring trust back to travel, we don't need to have multiple tests on all sides, but rather there should be interoperable trust in the technology and the platform. But on that note, thank you very much for everyone taking time out to be on the panel. And thank you to the audience who has attended for this informative session. Thank you very much, and have a great day.